Hello and welcome to New Hampshire. I'm Nora O'Donnell.
And I'm Major Garrett.
This is a very special edition of CBS News America Decides live from Manchester. Once every 4 years, the nation turns its eye towards New Hampshire. Voters here are finally getting their say after hundreds of candidate events and millions of dollars spent on ads.
It's 8 p.m. here on the East Coast, and polls have just closed at this hour. New Hampshire voters began voting in this contest. It's kind of a quaint tradition here at midnight, as the candidates and their campaigns made last-minute appeals in the first presidential primary of 2024. The race for the Republican nomination, once over 10 candidates strong, has narrowed to former President Donald Trump, who faces 91 felony charges and is dominating in national polls, versus Nikki Haley, Trump's former United Nations ambassador and former governor of South Carolina.
Donald Trump may become the first person since Richard Nixon to win the New Hampshire primary 3 times after he racked up endorsements from former rivals, including Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, just in the last few days. We spoke with Nikki Haley here in New Hampshire, and she dismissed the idea that this is a last-ditch effort to stop Trump. She is vowing to stay in this race and keep competing through her home state's primary in South Carolina next month. And tonight may be the best chance to upset the former president. What's really interesting is this state allows independent voters or undeclared voters to participate in this primary. And Major, that's of course what we're watching tonight. What share of the whole electorate are these moderate, undeclared independent voters which lean towards Nikki Haley?
By registration, undeclared voters, Nora, outnumber Republicans by about 70,000. What's the composition of the overall turnout and how much those undeclared show up tonight? Democrats, we should also point out, are also voting, though President Biden significantly and historically is not on the ballot here after the Democratic National Committee dropped New Hampshire as its first official primary, instead rewarding that coveted slot to South Carolina. New Hampshire has a state law requiring it hold its primary before any other state, so they're still going first, even though the results will not, at least at this point, count toward the president's delegate count. A write-in campaign is underway for the president. We will tonight be looking for that tally.
Right, but the main event is the Republican primary, and at this hour, CBS News can characterize the New Hampshire primary as lean Trump. We'll get to our CBS News data desk in just a moment for the latest there. But first, let's bring in CBS News Chief Election and Campaign Correspondent Robert Costa. I know you've been talking to your sources, and while winning this race is important, we're going to be looking tonight to see how long this contest will go on between Donald Trump and Nikki Haley. If she can get this race within single digits, what does that mean?
It means that she has a path ahead in this race. The race would be on to South Carolina, and especially on to Super Tuesday. Every Republican source I have in the country, whether it's on Capitol Hill or on Wall Street or a small business owner, they're watching the margin. Everybody who's a Republican's a political junkie tonight, because the margin's going to say everything about whether she can survive politically. And if she doesn't finish within, let's say, 1% or 9% behind Trump, it's hard to say she can go into her South Carolina home state and weather a blowout, which is expected, and then carry on to Super Tuesday. And the real question, Nora, you hate to say it like this, but it really matters in campaign politics. Money matters.
Yeah.
Is the money going to be there? She'll do a temperature check tomorrow morning in the next few days with the major donors in the country and see what's there, should she do well.
We should look at, we do already have, even though the polls have just closed, so we can begin to sort of characterize this race, but we do know a lot already about the makeup of this electorate here.
We do, and to help us figure that out and explain it, as he always does, let's go now to our Elections and Surveys Executive Director, Anthony Salvanta, who, of course, is at the CBS News data desk for a look at what we're learning tonight as the polls close. Anthony, what are our biggest takeaways?
Major Nora, let me show you how we're doing this, and we're going to be fully transparent in real time. This is the counted vote, and you can see there's a smattering of counties that have reported, but most in gray have not. But we have sent exit poll interviewers all over the state today, to all the north, the south, the east, the west, all over. We've collected that data. We've talked to voters. We found out who they voted for after they left the polling place. We put that all together into our models here at the data desk, and I can show you what that looks like. What we do is we come up with a range, and these are estimates for each of the counties. Right now, our CBS election model estimates that Donald Trump, at just under 54%, is in this range. You can get as high as 60, you get as low as 48, but Nikki Haley is in a range around 45%. And that makes this a lean Trump. But you see this overlap here between the two bars? That means it's not a projection yet. That means that there's still a possibility, as more vote comes in, that these could get tighter, that these estimates could close the gap a little bit. Still possible. So that shows you exactly how we work here at the data desk, taking all that information from all over the state and bringing it together into that model, Major.
But, Anthony, it's worth pointing out that if you're in one of those two campaigns, looking at what you're seeing right now, you'd rather be Trump than Haley. True?
Hence the characterization for the moment of lean Trump. And look, one reason for that is you all were talking about the exit polls earlier. Yes, there is a substantial portion of this, almost half, not quite half, right now about 45%, who are independents, and they are breaking for Nikki Haley. But this is still a Republican primary. There's still Republicans in this, and Donald Trump is doing extremely well with them. And that's the difference. And then he's got that base underneath. It's not as big as it was in Iowa, but he's got those folks who call themselves MAGA Republicans, and that puts a floor underneath them. So even though it's not everybody in this electorate, it still provides Donald Trump with a floor, and that's helping him out as of now, Major.
Numbers, transparency, and explanation. Anthony Salvanto, thank you so much. And of course, we will be checking back with you throughout the evening.
All right, we have our CBS News correspondents following both campaigns tonight. CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe is at the Trump watch party, and CBS News political correspondent Caitlin Huey-Burns is with the Haley campaign headquarters here in this state. Ed, let me begin with you. What's the mood there?
Nora, tonight the Trump campaign remains cautiously optimistic that they will pull off a big victory, and ideally one that's big enough to knock Nikki Haley out. And if she were to continue on, Trump aides tell CBS News she should expect, quote, unimaginable pain in her home state of South Carolina as the state's entire political establishment comes down on her and stands with the former president. The usual gathering of supporters here in Nashua, New Hampshire tonight, this suburb of Boston in the southern reaches of New Hampshire at this hotel. Among those supporters in attendance, we just noticed a little while ago, the disgraced former scandal-tarred Congressman George Santos of Long Island, who may very well be violating a court order by being here in New Hampshire tonight and not staying in his home state of New York. He had been instructed not to leave the New York City area without the judge's permission. We'll see if ultimately he faces any trouble, but that's the kind of supporter you see here. A lot of those that worked for the president in his White House, several Republican congressmen here tonight as well, and already some members of the congressional GOP leadership congratulating the former president on a big win in New Hampshire tonight. And we don't yet know exactly how big that win might be. Nora?
Ed O'Keefe, thank you. Want to bring in Caitlin Huey-Burns, who is there at Haley campaign headquarters. And Caitlin, there is new exit poll data that is just coming in. We've talked about this, 45% of the electorate independents, but also among those self-identified independents, 61% say they have voted for Haley. And according to our exit polls, the last few days seem to have shifted the momentum towards Haley. What is the campaign saying?
Good to be with you, Nora. Well, there are new people flowing into this room and people getting on stage behind me as the music is ramping up. Nikki Haley had been targeting those independent voters in the final days of the campaign, hosting lots and lots of events, a packed schedule, retail campaigning, trying to really convince every last voter through a handshake, through a conversation to turn out and vote. I can tell you just some texture of my reporting, talking to voters on the ground throughout the week and also at polling locations earlier today. And the theme that I found from those supporting Nikki Haley, those who said that they were planning to vote or voted for her, the theme among them was that they wanted a candidate who could defeat Donald Trump. then when you dig a little bit deeper, a lot of those voters I spoke with were independents. A couple today who I spoke with said that they had never voted for a Republican in their lifetimes, and they were doing so today to support Haley as a vehicle against Donald Trump. The big question, of course, tonight is she able to turn out enough of them given Donald Trump's hold on the Republican Party? And that's why she's been really threading the needle here, criticizing his policies, but not really going after him as hard as some of her supporters would have liked.
Ed O'Keefe, going back to you at Trump Victory Party tonight, or the Trump Watch Party tonight, probably better phrased. Does the Trump campaign believe they will now need a two-stage knockout blow if they can achieve it? One in New Hampshire and then in South Carolina, maybe not achieving the one they thought might be possible or reachable here in the Granite State?
They're prepared to launch that two-stage exit plan, if you will, Major, if necessary. But again, one of the things they've done here in New Hampshire in recent days is signal to Haley and signal to South Carolina Republican voters what's coming if this indeed drags on to February 24th, about 5 weeks from now, when South Carolina is scheduled to hold its primary. Trump flew up the state's governor, one of its senators, Tim Scott, who many now believe could be a potential running mate, several other members of the state government and congressional delegation, to demonstrate a sort of flex of force that awaits him in the Palmetto State should this continue on, arguing that he's got the state's political establishment at his back in a state in which he did very well 4 and 8 years ago, trying to suggest to Haley, you could do this if you really want to, but it could lead to profound political embarrassment. We should point out, Major, while CBS News continues to characterize this race at this hour as lean Trump, while other news outlets also are similarly characterizing it that way, already in this ballroom tonight, they've been flashing signs that say Trump wins New Hampshire as if it's over and done with. No indication when the former president might speak just yet, but clearly they're prepared for him to come out and give a victory speech tonight.
All right, Ed O'Keefe, thank you. And, you know, what's interesting about that, I think that there was largely a sense that Trump would win tonight.
Yes.
You know, and we are characterizing at CBS as lean Trump. And so really the question has been whether it would be a blowout win or whether Nikki Haley can get close to Donald Trump. And that will decide the contours of this race moving forward. Can she essentially spin a close win here to say this race should go on?
Not just spin, but spin it into gold, because that's what she's going to need to do. She's going to need to fundraise, as Bob Costa mentioned a moment ago, after New Hampshire. How do you characterize what you've achieved here and your path forward? That is going to be about meeting or exceeding expectations based on how you've tried to frame them as a candidate. It's always one of the challenges when you come in second. It's easy to frame a victory, harder to frame a second place finish.
Nora, you love golf. We all love golf. And when you're playing a major tournament and you're on that 18th hole, it comes down to that moment. Can you nail the shot? And sometimes you don't have to hit a perfect shot. You got to just close strong. And I think about politics. Think about 1992. You remember Bill Clinton coming up here to New Hampshire? Didn't win New Hampshire, but he called himself the comeback kid. And that was the message that propelled him forward in 1992 to the Democratic nomination. Well, let's listen to what Haley says tonight. Is she flat? Is she lacking energy? Or is she saying, regardless of the momentum and how it's characterized by the press or her rivals, how does she characterize her campaign tonight? I have covered her since her first race in 2010 for governor. I have covered her for a long time. This is the most important moment of her political career tonight. What does she say to the Republican Party? Not just spin about the results. What does she say about her path, her case to the country? Because they're all listening. This is it. This is the audience.
Well, there is a narrative that she can craft about being the comeback kid, because certainly it was just within the last couple of days that this field narrowed to 2 people. The exit poll data has shown that of those late deciders, 2/3 of them broke for Nikki Haley.
Yep.
That's an argument she can make, that as the field has narrowed into a 2-person contest, more voters will swing towards her.
Think about your conversation with her when you're standing there in the closing days in New Hampshire. She said Trump's declining. I mean, is she going to take on Trump
say that
tonight
again and again and
in
again?
front of the cameras again to a national
audience? As the
audience?
Trump coalition would say here in New Hampshire, nor the exit polling data is clear on this, 81% of self-identified conservative voters broke for Trump. and that's the Trump base, and Trump will say, I'm with the Republicans who know why they're with me, and I'm with them.
And so I have a question for you, because I haven't looked yet at, and this changes for each election cycle, but not every single state is different,
Sure.
right? So in this primary, undeclared voters are allowed to vote in the Republican primary. So they're former Democrats or independents who have voted. What is it like in South Carolina, Nevada, and then are there a bunch of closed primaries, as they're called, in these Super Tuesday states?
So they're about split in the Super Tuesday states, closed and open. But open is a much different concept here in New Hampshire than it is in South Carolina. It's open in South Carolina, but it's much more traditional Republican electorate. And in many of the Super Tuesday states, it is as well. Exactly. This is by far the best terrain for Nikki Haley. And it's worth pointing out that she has tried to create this as a two-person race. And she's vanquished or outlasted many others who were better funded, better known, and initially thought to have better chances. So as Bob Costa said, she's got exactly what she wants. Nora, I'm being told we need to bring in our CBS News senior political analyst and anchor of CBS News Primetime, John Dickerson, joining the conversation. John, your impressions so far?
Well, pick it up right where what you've been talking about. Does this rip open a conversation about the heart and soul of the Republican Party? Does Haley weaken Trump enough, even if Trump wins? I'll match Bob's 92 Clinton analogy with Muskie in 72. He won the New Hampshire primary, but was wounded by winning because it wasn't by enough. So what then does Haley do? Does she keep talking about Donald Trump's temperament? Does she keep saying he's in decline and rip open that conversation that Republicans have been trying to paper over, which is with these unaffiliated voters tonight standing in for the general election? Is it a general election that Donald Trump cannot win? This has been the central tension of the race, which is the Republican Party going to cling ever tighter to somebody who has the worst chance in a general election? And I would just add this final thought. There's going to be a month-long fight if Nikki Haley continues on and has enough of that money, which means the money people are going to have to make a decision about whether they want to have this big open public fight. A month-long fight between New Hampshire and South Carolina. That's a long time that could get very ugly. And Donald Trump, as we've seen in raising issues about Nikki Haley's gender, in her smarts, her ethnicity, her name, he does some things in combat that might hurt his chances even more in a general election.
It's going to be intense, though.
Yeah, it's going to be intense. And then, John, as you know, I mean, the calendar also, there's a collision between what happens these contests and also what's happening in the courtroom.
Well, exactly. And that's another thing that, does Nikki Haley, as Bob mentioned in that speech tonight or in another one, bring up the court cases? And in other words, in that month-long combat, does she go through all of the liabilities that Donald Trump has? And does the result tonight give extra weight? Those liabilities, of course, have been there, but he's been seen as a winner or seen as too powerful for Republicans to challenge any of these obvious challenges he has. Does her win tonight give enough to those that this becomes a big public conversation, airing all of that really difficult laundry for the party for at least a month? And then, as you say, in these contests after that, that's something no Republican wants. And we've seen that they don't want it in their lining up behind Donald Trump. But even Ron DeSantis, who's lined up behind Trump, had an interview today in which he said that there are big warning signs for the Republicans because of all of these issues that Donald Trump has.
John Dickerson, thank you so very much.
Thanks, John. And Major Garrett, I think you're going to continue most of this right now. I've got to go update the CBS Evening News for our friends in the middle of the country and the west of the country. So I'll be back. I'll see you guys later.
After the break, we will check back with Anthony Salvanto at the CBS News Data Desk. You are streaming America Decides. Welcome back to America Decides. CBS News can now project former President Donald Trump as the winner of the New Hampshire primary. Nikki Haley is addressing supporters in Concord, New Hampshire. Let's go and join those remarks in progress.
Who was with me on day one. He's a patriot. He's a hardcore conservative. And he is my friend, General Don Bolduc. And Sharon, thank you so much. I want to congratulate Donald Trump on his victory tonight. He earned it, and I want to acknowledge that. Now, you've all heard the chatter among the political class. They're falling all over themselves, saying this race is over. Well, I have news for all of them. New Hampshire is first in the nation. It is not the last in the nation. This race is far from over. There are dozens of states left to go. And the next one is my sweet state of South Carolina. At one point in this campaign, there were 14 of us running, and we were at 2% in the polls. Well, I'm a fighter. And I'm scrappy. And now we're the last one standing next to Donald Trump. And today we got close to half of the vote. We still have a ways to go, but we keep moving up. For a lot of people, politics is way too personal. It's not personal for me. I voted for Trump twice. I was proud to serve America in his cabinet. I agree with many of his policies. I decided to run because I'm worried about the future of our country and because it's time to put the negativity and chaos behind us. We have an economy that's crushing middle-class Americans. We have a border that is totally open and dangerous, creating a disaster in our country. Unbelievable! We have schools that are failing too many of our children, and we have a world on fire with a war in Europe and the Middle East and a huge and growing threat from China. And then you look at Washington, D.C. We have a Congress that fights about everything and accomplishes nothing. And we have Joe Biden in the White House making one bad decision after another, when he's making any decisions at all. Our country's in a real mess. And the question is, who's going to fix it? With Donald Trump, Republicans have lost almost every competitive election. We lost the Senate. We lost the House. We lost the White House. We lost in 2018. We lost in 2020. And we lost in 2022. The worst kept secret in politics is how badly the Democrats want to run against Donald Trump.
Trump's a loser. He's a loser.
They know Trump is the only Republican in the country who Joe Biden can defeat. You can't fix the mess if you don't win an election.
We want to win.
A Trump nomination is a Biden win and a Kamala Harris presidency.
Dump Trump.
I defeat Biden handily.
We want you, Nikki.
With Donald Trump, you have one bout of chaos after another. This court case, that controversy, this tweet, that senior moment. You can't fix Joe Biden's chaos with Republican chaos. The other day, Donald Trump accused me of not providing security at the Capitol on January 6th. Now, I've long called for mental competency tests for politicians over the age of 75. Trump claims he'd do better than me in one of those tests. Maybe he would, maybe he wouldn't. But if he thinks that, then he should have no problem standing on a debate stage with me. Most Americans do not want a rematch between Biden and Trump. The first party to retire its 80-year-old candidate is going to be the party that wins this election. And I think it should be the Republicans that win this election. So our fight is not over, because we have a country to save. In the next 2 months, millions of voters in over 20 states will have their say. We should honor them and allow them to vote. And guess what? In the next 2 months, Joe Biden isn't going to get any younger or any better. We'll have all the time we need to defeat Joe Biden. When we get to South Carolina, Donald Trump's going to have a harder time falsely attacking me. The great people of South Carolina know I cut their taxes. They know I signed the toughest illegal immigration bill in the country. They know we passed voter ID and tort reform and ethics reform, and they know we moved 35,000 people from welfare to work. Every time I've run for office in South Carolina, I've beaten the political establishment. They're lined up against me again. That's no surprise. But South Carolina voters don't want a coronation. They want an election. And we're going to give them one. Because we are just getting started. Thank you for the energy. Thank you for the love, New Hampshire. We're going home to South Carolina. I love you too. Thank you. Thank you. Now, I want to say it's really important that I say some additional thank yous. I thanked Governor Chris Sununu and General Don and Sharon Bolduc, but I also want to mention just a few other people who've been incredibly gracious to us, to the entire Sununu family, including Governor John Sununu and Senator John Easton.
That's Nikki Haley wrapping up her remarks in Concord, New Hampshire, after finishing second to Donald Trump and making one thing clear. In her words, the race is far from over. And to prove that point, she referred to former President Donald Trump's, quote, senior moments and Republican chaos, not only his, but in the Republican-led House of Representatives, at least by implication, and also talking about the necessity of competency tests for anyone running for office over the age of 75. but offering as a replacement for that a full-fledged debate between her and former President Trump in advance of South Carolina's primary some 4 weeks from now. Nikki Haley finishing second, CBS News projecting Donald Trump, former President of the United States, winner of the New Hampshire primary. Also, we should note that we can declare that President Biden will, by write-in candidacy here in New Hampshire, win the New Hampshire primary, though that is not being recognized by the Democratic National Committee as the first in the nation primary. That honor goes to South Carolina. Controlman, can I bring in Anthony Salvanto at the data desk now? Okay, very good. I wanted to do that, so I'm very glad we can do that. Anthony, I don't want to jump the gun, so I always want to make sure you're there and ready, and you're always able. Anthony, break down the tale of the tape and why we led ourselves to project Donald Trump the winner here in New Hampshire.
Thank you, Major. Let me show you, because I told everybody we were going to be fully transparent here at the data desk. This is the vote that has been counted so far, the townships that are lit up in red going for Donald Trump. But you can see they haven't all come in yet, right? A couple for Nikki Haley here in the yellow. But we had exit pollers all over the state. And we had people, reporters going in, getting the results from those precincts even before the townships came in and sent us that data. So you put that all in our CBS model and watch over here. This is the counted vote, but I'm just going to switch it over. If this thing will cooperate. There we go. I'm going to switch it over. And that's our estimate, okay? That still holds up at Donald Trump at 56 to Haley 44. Now, there's another wrinkle here. Those estimates have ranges around them. I'm going to take you right over here and show you this is exactly what we look at the data desk. We take a look at those ranges and we say, okay, Donald Trump could bounce from 58 to about 53. Nikki Haley could bounce from 46 to down to 41. But there's no overlap here. There's no overlap. And when there's no overlap, that means whatever happens within those ranges for each candidate, they're not going to cross. And that's a CBS News projection. That's how we do it. And that's why we can say Donald Trump is projected to win this primary when all the votes are counted, Major.
Anthony Salvanto, of course, we will be checking back with you throughout the evening. I want to bring in John Dickerson, our CBS News senior political analyst, and, of course, anchor of CBS News Primetime with John Dickerson. So Anthony Salvanto just talked to us, John, about the range, and there's no overlap, but there is an available space for expectations and rhetoric around expectations. I think that's where this evening is going next, don't you?
I do, although Nikki Haley just in that speech she gave made it clear that at least for the next couple of days or so, and maybe even for the whole month, she's going to go right at Donald Trump and those liabilities we were talking about earlier. A lot of the things that Republicans who've lined up behind Trump have wanted to paper over. I mean, she went and she went right at the question of mental decline, as you mentioned that line about senior moments, but tying his mistake in transposing her name with Nancy Pelosi's to the fact that he won't debate her. This is now at the center of this race, and mentioning his trials. These are things that her candidacy is now bringing up and is going to be a part of. And if she's going to be in the race for a month, then that's not a conversation Republicans want to be having out loud all day long for a month.
Indeed, John. She talked about things that have been characterized here privately to me as the elephant in the room. Well, the elephant in the room is still Donald Trump. He's the winner here, but she brought up some issues that she had skirted for sure in Iowa, now bringing up more directly. To be continued. John Dickerson, thank you so much. Coming up, we will check in with both presidential campaigns right here in New Hampshire. Of course, that's the Trump campaign and the Nikki Haley campaign. The polls have been closed in New Hampshire for about a half an hour. CBS News projects former President Donald Trump will win the New Hampshire primary. Olivia Rinaldi is at the Trump Watch Party in Nashua, New Hampshire, and joins us now. Olivia, set the scene for us, please. Olivia, can you hear us in Nashua?
Hi, yes, I can.
Set the scene for us, if you'd be so kind.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're here at the Trump rally the watch party that he's holding at the Sheraton in Nashua. And while we're here, there's been a steady stream of folks coming into this party. Just a few minutes ago, the projection came up on the screens behind me, and it said Donald Trump has won New Hampshire. There were loud chants of USA, USA. We are expecting the former president to speak here shortly. There's been a whole cast of characters that have been coming in here as well, including George Santos. I had the chance to pull him aside. That's the disgraced congressman, former congressman from New York. And I asked him, was he invited here? And he said, no, he wasn't invited, that it's an open invitation. He decided to come anyways. So it's been fascinating to see the people walking through the stores and celebrate this momentous win with the Trump campaign.
Olivia Rinaldi, thank you so much. And I've been in Trump rooms like that. I know it's hard to hear, and sometimes the delay complicates things like that. Thank you for sticking with us, Olivia. We really appreciate it. CBS News campaign reporter Torian Small joins us now from Charleston, South Carolina, where this story and these two campaigns are clearly heading. Torian, what can you tell us?
Yeah, Major, so we heard Nikki Haley's speech there that she's going home. She's coming to South Carolina to focus the remainder of her efforts as she stays in this race. Her campaign is looking to stay through Super Tuesday, and we know that she's invested about $4 million in TV time here throughout the state. She has a first rally tomorrow evening in North Charleston, and then she's going to build out from there. She's looking to stay in this race despite this loss, and part of the reason for that is because she wants to make the case to donors that she's built a comprehensive campaign, while a lot of her primary rivals who have since dropped out have focused their efforts on Iowa. She split her time between New Hampshire and South Carolina. She's hoping that come February 24th, it'll pay off for her.
Torian Small in Charleston, South Carolina, thank you so very much. I want to go now to our CBS News campaign reporter, Jake Rosen, who has been in New Hampshire for several weeks. He's our embedded reporter here at a polling place in Merrimack, New Hampshire today, speaking with voters. Jake, in general, what did you hear today, and what are your observations on what we've seen tonight based on all your reporting here in New Hampshire?
Hey, Major. Just like what we've heard the other reporters at different events say tonight, a lot of disenfranchisement with the Republican Party. The Trump supporters I spoke with are upset that Nikki Haley has not bent the knee and endorsed him yet. Supporters of, President Trump very much voicing concerns about immigration, foreign issues, and the economy. It just seemed like people who were even writing in Joe Biden were frustrated that they had to do so tonight. It feels like a state to me, Major, that feels a little bit forgotten.
And Jake, I know you've talked to voters today. And those who came to the polls that you interacted with who were for Nikki Haley, did they talk to you about anything that was uppermost on their mind or motivating to them?
Yeah, and just like Nikki Haley's message, it was all about moving forward. I spoke to one independent voter from Merrimack. He said he voted for Nikki Haley because he could no longer support Trump. He supported Trump up here in the 2016 primary, and after his behavior leading up between the New Hampshire primary and the 2016 election, this voter told me that Trump actually lost his vote, and he ended up voting for voting for Hillary Clinton, and then voted for Joe Biden in 2020. He said he was brought back over to the Republican Party tonight because of Nikki Haley's message about unity and Donald Trump still continuing to be in this race.
And I know, Jake, you saw lots of Trump events here in the state. If you were to characterize the New Hampshire Trump MAGA voter and their issue set, what would you say that would be?
Well, New Hampshire is a border state, and the northern border comes up constantly in conversations. I spoke with 3 Trump supporters on camera tonight, many off camera, all voiced concerns just about the flow of opioids into the state, illegal immigrants potentially coming into the state, and just generally Trump's message about the economy. They said that when Trump was president, they just felt better about things, that their paycheck went further at the supermarket, and basically that they want that back, and they just haven't seen it. And yes, maybe things have gotten better in the last few months. They're just not feeling it. They're looking to Trump going forward.
Jake Rosen, our New Hampshire-based campaign reporter, thank you so very much. We will check back with Anthony Salvanto, of course, at the CBS News desk. That'll be in just one moment. On the other side of this break, you're streaming America Decides.
The worst kept secret in politics is how badly the Democrats want to run against Donald Trump.
Trump's a loser! He's a loser!
They know Trump is the only Republican in the country who Joe Biden can defeat.
Welcome back to America Decides from Manchester, New Hampshire, leaving no doubt that this race will continue after New Hampshire and that she has some rhetorical jousting to do with former President Trump, even though she finished second, Nikki Haley, in her remarks a little bit ago here in Concord, New Hampshire. CBS News projects former President Trump has won the New Hampshire primary. To find out how, let's go now to our Elections and Surveys Executive Director, Anthony Salvanto, of course, at the CBS News Data Desk. Anthony, what new do you have to share with us?
Major, first of all, if you mention, as Nikki Haley said, she intends to continue this race, that means we've got to bring up the delegate tracker. We estimate delegates. We don't just project races. Out of New Hampshire right now, 11-8 Trump to Haley. So it's not a big delegate haul, right? The state overall, we've still got a long way to go. In fact, if we make this delegates to date, you need 12-15 to get the nomination. We are a long, long way from that. So technically, this race does have a long way to go. Just wanted to sort of show you that, to tee this up. And look, in terms of this contest, it's really straightforward. Maybe it's a little bit closer than some of the pre-election polls had it, but in any event, Donald Trump has a sizable lead. It's double digits right now, and that's the way it is in the counted vote, and then it's also the way it is in our estimates. If I show you that and I estimate what's going to happen across all of these towns here, it's still a Trump lead, and that goes into our projection, and that's the how, Major.
Anthony Salvanto, of course, we will be checking back with you as the evening progresses. I want to bring in our political panel now, Leslie Sanchez and John McHenry. Leslie is CBS News political analyst and served in the George W. Bush administration. John is the vice president at North Star Opinion Research, whose firm worked on Ron DeSantis' 2018 campaign for governor. Leslie, let me start with you. Your impressions of what we've seen so far tonight and the rhetoric from Nikki Haley.
Well, I think the rhetoric of Nikki Haley sounds like a lot of the Republican potential nominees from 2015 and 2016. You know, one thing to be the Republican nominee, you have to actually win. And to talk about winning potentially in a hypothetical with the president, it's really difficult when you continue to lose. And that momentum or lack of momentum is going to be significant. I want to talk about the issue of immigration, though, as that came up again. Donald Trump did a very strategic thing when he was talking about immigration. And it wasn't one of the most important things in 2016. It was one of the four most important. But 8 years later, immigration is top of mind behind the economy. Donald Trump's ads were closing on the importance of immigration, border security, and the failed Biden policies. That is a response Nikki Haley never had an answer to. So I think that is really part of the big deficit you're seeing tonight.
And John, I want to ask you about undeclared voters in New Hampshire. As I said at the top of this show, they outnumber registered Republicans in the state of New Hampshire. It's perfectly permissible. It's a longstanding tradition here, by about 70,000. What's your perception of the undeclareds and whatever effect they had on the outcome tonight?
Well, they've had a huge effect on the outcome by keeping Nikki Haley still involved in this race. She really, going into this, looking at the polling from this past week, she needed about 47% of the electorate to be undeclared voters, which would match the high from 2012 when there was no Democratic primary and Obama was running for his reelection. What she also needs in order to win is more like 75% of those voters to support her. It looks like at this point she probably got somewhere in the 60 to 65% range. That's enough to keep her in the race, to put her within single digits overall once all those votes from Manchester and Nashua are counted, some of the more sort of suburban, urban areas of the state. And that gives her enough impetus to keep pushing on towards South Carolina.
John, is that kind of coalition transferable outside of New Hampshire?
Well, South Carolina is going to be a very interesting test case. South Carolina is certainly a more conservative electorate than what we see in New Hampshire, but in South Carolina, everybody can vote in either primary that they choose to. So we could very well see, and as Nikki Haley pointed to, those are people who know her. They know she didn't raise their taxes. They know that she cut their taxes. So if she can draw on some of those people who remember what a good governor she was in South Carolina, she may very well be able to use that as a springboard heading into Super Tuesday.
Leslie, I want to get your impressions about what I know the Trump campaign hoped it would achieve here, and they may when the former president speaks later on this evening, say as much. It's a knockout punch in New Hampshire. But Nikki Haley has already made it clear she's not knocked out. The contours of this conversation going forward, and as you know, a week can be a lifetime in politics. We've got 4 weeks between now and South Carolina's primary. That means 4 lifetimes. What do you expect to see?
A lot of lifetimes. There's no doubt about it. What's interesting about the Trump campaign in comparison to, let's say, previous cycles is he continued to keep that focus on the economy, and the Republican Party went with him. If you look at the comparison, they felt that times were better when he was president. There's a contrast. And for us to be sitting here talking about Trump is talking about policy. He's talking about economic initiatives and the border, getting that under control, as opposed to Nikki Haley talking about temperament and the unity that they may have, and that kind of comparison. Republicans are not there. I think the base of the party wants a winner who can change the economic course. And unless she starts talking about that, I think she's going to miss a lot of the support she's already losing among political elites and voters in South Carolina.
Leslie Sanchez and John McHenry, thank you very much. Just to recap, CBS News projects Donald Trump has won the New Hampshire primary, and he's expected to speak in the next hour. And of course, we will bring you those comments live. I'm Major Garrett in Manchester, New Hampshire, and you are streaming America Decides. Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett. Welcome back to a special edition of America Decides, live from our CBS News headquarters here in Manchester, New Hampshire, for our continuing coverage of the New Hampshire presidential primary. CBS News projects former President Donald Trump has won the New Hampshire primary. Former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley has vowed emphatically to stay in the race for the Republican nomination. Here is a live look at former President Trump's watch party here in New Hampshire. He is set to talk soon, and we will, of course, bring those comments live when they happen. We have team coverage tonight with our correspondents across the great state of New Hampshire and, of course, at our CBS News data desk. Speaking of that desk, let us bring in our Elections and Surveys Executive Director, Anthony Salvanto, with more on the tail of tonight's primary tape. Anthony?
Major, how are you? This is the current vote count that we have out of New Hampshire. We projected Donald Trump. That will hold up because even our estimates, when we take into account all the exit polling we've done throughout the state, gives Donald Trump at least or around 58%. So that's going to hold up even as vote comes in from other places around the state. And then the other thing I'm going to show you, Major, is I'm going to go to the exit poll because this is, as you mentioned, the tail of the tape. This is the tail of the voters as they described it. Look at, not surprising, the lopsided vote among voters who called themselves MAGA, right? 93-6. That kind of puts a floor under Donald Trump's support. And even though there aren't as many of them in New Hampshire as there are in Iowa, that helps get him started. But he also wins the very conservative. And this, which I've been watching all night, especially in suburban areas, voters without college degrees. This is really important because it's been a really center point of Donald Trump's base really for years. And so he is dependent on and he is getting support from voters without college degrees. He's done it in Iowa. He's done it in New Hampshire. And even as you start to look ahead to other primaries, that's going to form, you're going to look at their numbers, and that's going to form a big part of his base, at least in a demographic sense. And attitudinally, the MAGA voters, that all puts a base under his support, Major.
Anthony Salvanto, we will, of course, be checking with you again as the evening continues. Thank you so very much. I want to bring in CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe, who's at the Trump watch party, and CBS News political correspondent Caitlin Huey-Burns, who's with the Haley campaign. Ed, set the scene for us. What are you seeing? Who's there? And what are they anticipating?
Major, we are expected to hear later this hour from the former president as they'll address the hundreds of supporters who are here in this steamy hotel ballroom. Among those who are here tonight, in essence, vouching for him, South Carolina Senator Tim Scott, Georgia Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, handful of longtime Trump loyalists, former White House advisors, all of whom agree this primary is over. It's time for the Republican Party to unite. Of course, up the street in Concord, where Nikki Haley spoke a little while ago, they think differently about that. So the Trump campaign says, fine, you want to continue this fight? Let's do that. But Nikki Haley should anticipate, quote, unimaginable pain, as one Trump advisor put it to CBS News today, if the Palmetto State is the next stop in this primary, as it's now expected to be. 5 weeks of that state's political establishment coming down on its former governor, somebody who doesn't have good relationships with many currently in leadership across South Carolina, certainly not in the Republican Party, but we'll see how it goes. We are, among those we've spotted tonight, Major, and we should call this out, is the embattled former New York Congressman George Santos. And you're sitting at home rolling your eyes right now thinking, why would you mention that, Ed? Well, based on our reporting, our Scott McFarlane, among others, calling out tonight that he's likely then in violation of a court order, which said that he wasn't supposed to leave the New York City area or Washington and not travel out of state. But he's here. He was at the bar. He was talking to supporters. He was here in the room a little while ago, and he's very much in violation of that court order, apparently. This crowd is anticipating the former president's arrival again momentarily. We'll see to what extent he calls out Nikki Haley's decision to soldier on, and what, if anything, his plan might be to win. And we should remind people, a win is a win tonight, but this was a far more moderate and independent electorate than was seen last week in Iowa. Among the warning signs for the former president, there was higher skepticism today among the Republican and independent voters who showed up about whether he would be fit to serve as president again, should he be convicted of a crime this year ahead of the election. That's important in this state because it's one of those that's usually up for grabs, or where both parties might play in the closing weeks in hopes of getting the 4 electoral votes and padding their victory. He tried to do that in 2016 and he lost. He tried to do it in 2020 and he lost. The warning signs are there again that he may face that skepticism and concern about his legal woes as he runs. It's part of the reason why Governor Chris Sununu endorsed Nikki Haley instead, arguing that Trump couldn't win this state, couldn't win it for Republicans because of his troubles. We'll see whether or not that has a factor going into the general election, Major.
Ed O'Keefe, thank you very much. I want to go now to Caitlin Huey-Burns, who is at what remains of Nikki Haley's watch party post-New Hampshire speech event in Concord, New Hampshire. Caitlin, set the scene for it. Haley's already given her remarks, made it very clear she's going to stay in this race, was more stinging in her rhetoric against former President Trump. How does it all feel there?
Hey, Major, good to see you. Well, as you can see, the ballroom behind me has pretty much cleared out. Nikki Haley came onto the stage at 8:19 p.m., just about 20 minutes after the last polls closed here. And if you check our email boxes, she came on stage just as CBS News was projecting her opponent, Donald Trump, won the New Hampshire primary. So why did she come out that early? And it was all intentional, an effort to set the narrative that she wanted to set, and talking before Donald Trump did. We've seen second place finishers do that here in New Hampshire, Bill Clinton being one of them. She vowed to fight another day, move on to her home state of South Carolina, but that also is an uphill climb for reasons I'll explain in a moment. Here in New Hampshire, I've been talking to sources both in the Haley campaign and in outside groups supporting her, and they say that they have some reasons to hope that she can live to fight another day, because they say she overperformed expectations here starting at the beginning of this race, and she said that on the trail before, that she made this a 2-person race after and was the last person standing. And they're also waiting for what exactly the margins are. Talking to sources before this primary happened, everyone was saying that she had to come in single digits of Donald Trump to be able to make a case for furthering her campaign. But Major, as you well know, covering South Carolina, next primary on the list, it is very difficult terrain for her. Yes, she won South Carolina twice as governor, but the last time that she was on the ballot was 2014, 2 years before Donald Trump came on the scene and reformed the Republican Party. She has not been elected there with the same kind of movement within the Republican Party. And I talked to Tim Scott earlier today. He's the South Carolina senator who made news over the weekend for endorsing Trump over Haley. Haley, remember, had picked him to that Senate seat back in 2012. And he made the case that, look, Donald Trump is essentially the incumbent. He is positioned that way. And what he has learned from having competed in this race and now has joined Trump in support of him, he said that Donald Trump is the most powerful force, the most powerful politician in the party and beyond. And so that's why you see a coalescing, making it difficult for Haley to continue.
Caitlin Huey-Burns for us in Concord. Thank you so very much. Finn Gomez and Robert Costa join us now here on the set. Finn, of course, CBS News' political director. Robert is CBS News' chief election and campaign correspondent. So, gentlemen, one thing we should also specify, CBS News has also projected that President Biden, via his write-in candidacy here in New Hampshire, has won the New Hampshire primary. And Finn, let our audience know about some significant, it sounds like inside baseball, but in the terms of a national campaign personnel matters, there's been some important personnel developments in the Biden re-election campaign. Please catch us up on that.
Yeah, absolutely, Major. CBS News has learned that Mike Donilon, the president's speechwriter, and Jen O'Malley Dillon, a top official and top advisor to President Biden at the White House, are now moving over to the Biden campaign. They're going to be top leadership there with Julie Chavez Rodriguez, the campaign manager. It's being characterized as a shake-up by some, but the Biden-Harris campaign say this is a needed structural effort to increase and make their campaign a little more robust as they go into the cycle. However, it is being seen with some skepticism, obviously, because it's, of course, there's been some criticism towards that.
And we should also underscore the fact that Jen O'Malley Dillon was the campaign manager in 2020 and is highly regarded among Democratic strategists as someone who not only has the ear of the president, is one of the newest members of the inner circle. Usually it takes 20 to 25 years to be in that inner circle. She doesn't have that much time with President Biden, but she's in nonetheless. Robert Costa, your impressions of what we've seen so far tonight here in New Hampshire.
Well, it was great. It's great to be with both of you here. Former Ambassador Haley got on the stage quickly, and she got on the stage quickly to start defining the night on her terms. And she said this race is far from over, and she's looking ahead to her home state of South Carolina. She called it my sweet home state of South Carolina. She's looking ahead potentially to Super Tuesday states in March. If the ultimate margin here, let's say, is within 8% to 12%, 15% away from Trump, she's going to stay in this race. I believe her message tonight stands. I take her at face value from what she said on stage tonight. The question is, will the money follow? And will the momentum follow? Can she turn this 10-point second place finish, or 11 points, or 9 points, whatever it ends up being, whatever CBS ends up having as the final number, can that become rocket fuel for her campaign? And we'll have to see. It's going to be difficult. You see, it's almost every time I open my phone tonight, there's another Republican senator endorsing Trump. John Cornyn was one of the first ones tonight, the Texas senator, saying he's now behind Trump.
Right.
So
moving up the echelons of Senate Republican leadership.
Right.
Because they want the race ended.
Right.
A lot of these senators, they don't want to have a long contested primary, especially as Trump has all these other issues. They don't want to see this hover over them forever, a contested primary. They're going to have to take a side eventually.
Robert, I want to ask you this. One of the things that the Haley campaign says is, hey, we haven't even had this person-on-person conversation for even a week. Let's let it play out. Let's actually see what the Republican appetite is to have not a divided anti-Trump conversation, not a Nikki Haley, Ron DeSantis, or Nikki Haley, Vivek Ramaswamy, but Nikki Haley, Trump. And let's see what actually happens. They're going to get a chance for that.
But you need some political friction.
Right.
So
she got a little friction tonight.
She got some friction tonight, no doubt about it, a little electricity.
Yeah.
But
drew some lines.
It drew some lines. Is it enough, though, to draw Trump into a debate? I'm not so sure. Talking to Trump people tonight, look, Chris LaCivita, Trump's top advisor, telling reporters that he believes Haley is delusional for staying in the race.
Finn, your observation on that point?
Speaking to top Haley campaign officials, they insist that they have the terrain. They have a friendly terrain. Yes, you have to get past South Carolina, and there's a great point that was made by Caitlin and by Bob. Look, he's leading her. If you look at the average of the polls, recent polls from this past month, he's leading her on average by 37 points in her home state. That's a massive hurdle. However, if you get past that hurdle, and if she does have the fuel to go through that state and survive that primary, which is also relatively an open primary, by the way. There is a terrain there that they go to Michigan. There are other places. 11 out of the 16 states on Super Tuesday are basically open or semi-open primaries, and they say this is friendly terrain for them and enough to propel them through the cycle.
Finn Gomez, Robert Costa, thank you so very much. Want to bring in our CBS News senior political analyst and, of course, the anchor of CBS News Primetime, John Dickerson. John, Finn was just talking about the possibility of closing that gap in South Carolina. Mo Udall wrote a book about this. You can come in second over and over and over again. And I know I'm making a dated reference to Mo Udall, but you have to eventually win. And for Nikki Haley, she is beating expectations, did so in Iowa, did so possibly here. But at some point, you've got to put victories on the board.
No one loves a Mo Udall reference more than me, Major. As he said after losing, the voters have spoken. And then he used a word to refer to the voters that was not complimentary. You're right, Major. And before we even get to South Carolina, it feels like Bob Costa mentioned earlier Nikki Haley's pain threshold earlier in the evening. And you think of the Richard Ben Cramer book, What It Takes, about the 1988 presidential race. What it takes meant, did the candidate who had the intestinal fortitude. Ambassador Haley has a pain threshold question to answer. Does she want the pain of a full-throated campaign with Donald Trump along the lines of the lines she drew tonight in her speech this evening, which were about his temperament, competency, age, court cases, which are at the heart of the Republican Party's conversation that it does not want to have? The endorsers who are supporting Trump don't want Nikki Haley to raise those questions because those are the questions they are overlooking in making the endorsement of Donald Trump. Does she want the pain of that very ugly campaign? Or does she want the pain of having to put the blinker on and take the exit ramp from the very full-throated comments she made that she was going to stay in the race? Those are her two pain calculations that she has to make. And I'm sure she's getting some phone conversations with people saying, look, you put up a good fight, but there's no way. This is Donald Trump's party. Why would you hurt the party and go through all of the pain of being on the end of his attacks? You might want to reconsider. And I can't imagine what's going through her head right now. If she stays in the race, it's going to be a full airing of some of those most very difficult questions about Donald Trump.
John Dickerson, thank you. We are waiting to hear from former President Trump after his projected win here in New Hampshire. We will bring you, of course, his remarks live when they happen. Before that, we're going to go to break. We will leave you with some remarks from Nikki Haley earlier this evening. You are streaming America Decides.
The worst kept secret in politics is how badly the Democrats want to run against Donald Trump.
Trump's a loser! He's a loser!
They know Trump is the only Republican in the country who Joe Biden can defeat.
That is a live look at the Trump watch party in Nashua, New Hampshire. Welcome back to America Decides. I'm Major Garrett. Thanks so much for being with us as we await the remarks on this New Hampshire primary evening of former President Trump, who is, as CBS News projects, the winner of the New Hampshire primary. Let me bring in Finn Gomez. Finn, we're going to talk until the former president reaches the stage. We've been told by those who are there that could happen at any moment, so I may abruptly interrupt you so we can go to those remarks. Yeah. But until that moment, for the former president, some lines were drawn by Nikki Haley tonight. References to a senior moment or senior moments. Competency. Oh, we don't have to take a competency test. How about you debate me in South Carolina? That's not what we heard from Nikki Haley in Iowa. So she is clearly girding herself for this person-on-person conversation. Oh, Finn, I'm not even going to have a chance to interrupt you. So I've been told by our control room that the former president is coming out. That is the, as Finn well knows, the entrance music. Lee Greenwood. And there he is. Finn, go ahead and chat for a little bit, because it's going to be a moment or two, as we both know.
I've heard this song way too many times. I've covered over 80 Trump rallies, and yeah, we're probably about 30 seconds or a minute away to the former president speaking. Clearly,
a slow walk and wave, no doubt.
Speaking to Chris LaCivita a little earlier tonight, the
senior advisor
former president to the former president, he says that, you know, they're looking past Nikki Haley. They're looking to Joe Biden, and they think that tonight, they said.
Based on that, do you expect his remarks to be more about Biden and less about Haley?
Yeah, I do. I think there's going to be a lot of focus on Joe Biden. You know, I mean, they are looking to the general election, and again, you know, there has never been a presidential contender who has won Iowa and New Hampshire and not gone on to secure the nomination. Something they emphasize repeatedly. So to them, he's won. He's going to be the nominee. It's inevitable. Let's focus on the gen.
And not only is there a slow walk and a wave, but now there's the assemblage of family members, surrogates, and others who traveled the state for the former president. So it sounded to me that Nikki Haley tonight was trying to get the former president's attention. Yep. Attack me, engage me. Right. But one of the things you can do in politics to sort of bury that is not engage.
Is ignore.
Look beyond that.
Yeah.
Exactly. Insult by showing your or demonstrating your indifference. Not the easiest thing or the instinctive thing for former President Trump to do. It will be interesting to see on what side of that ratio he falls in his remarks this evening.
Yeah, sometimes he can't help himself. I think he's just, he sees the target, he goes for it. But he has been respectively more disciplined than previous cycles. This is his third New Hampshire primary, right? And actually the first in the history to win 3 New Hampshire primaries, 2016, 2020, and now 2024. But I
believe he's tied with Richard Nixon in that category.
That's right, Richard Nixon. Excuse me. Yes, of course. But again, they are more disciplined. They have the more ground game and organization. They are really looking ahead to the general election.
Then I'm going to interrupt you now because he is at the microphone. The former President of the United States, Donald Trump, the projected winner of the New Hampshire Republican primary.
Well, I want to thank everybody. This is a fantastic state. This is a great, great state. We won New Hampshire 3 times now. 3. We win it every time. We win the primary, we win the generals, we've won it, and it's a very, very special place to me. It's very important. If you remember in 2016, we came here and we needed that win, and we won by 21 points, and it was great. And today, I have to tell you, it was very interesting because I said, wow, what a great victory. But then somebody ran up to the stage all dressed up nicely when it was at 7, but now I just walked up and it's at 14. But she ran up when it was 7, and we have to do what's good for our party. And she was up, and I said, wow, she's doing like a speech like she won. She didn't win, she lost. And last week we had a little bit of a problem, and if you remember, Ron was very upset because she ran up and she pretended she won Iowa. And I looked around, I said, didn't she come in 3rd? Yeah, she came in 3rd. And then I looked at the polls. She was talking about most winnability, who's going to win, and I had one put up. I don't know if you see it, but I have one put up. We've won almost every single poll in the last 3 months against crooked Joe Biden, almost every poll. And she doesn't win those polls. And she doesn't win those. This is not your typical victory speech, but let's not have somebody take a victory when she had a very bad night. She had a very bad night. And you have the now very unpopular governor of this state. This guy, he's got to be on something. I've never seen anybody with energy. He's like hopscotch. And I'm watching this guy, and 2 weeks ago, he said, we're going to win in the landslide, we're going to win. About 3 days ago, he started saying, well, we want to do well. That's a big difference. But I walked out just now, we're 14 points up, and I don't know what it's going to be. But when she was up here, it was like 6 or 7, and, with like 7% of the vote counted. Now, let me just tell you, we had an unbelievable week last week in Iowa. We set a record. It was the best in the history of the caucus, in the history. And I remember I sort of had the same feeling. I'm up and I'm watching, and I said, she's taking a victory lap. And we beat her so badly, but Ron beat her also. Ron came in 2nd, and he left. She came in 3rd, and she's still hanging around. The other thing, she only got 25% of the Republican votes. I don't know if you saw that. Tremendous numbers of independents came out because in this state, because you have a governor that doesn't frankly know what the hell he's doing in this state, in the Republican primary, they accept Democrats to vote. In fact, I think they had 4,000 Democrats before October 6th. They already voted. Now, they're only voting because they want to make me look as bad as possible. Because if you remember, We won in 2016. And if you really remember, and if you want to play it straight, we also won in 2020. By more. And we did much better in 2020 than we did in 2016. But as they said, we lost by a whisker, just by a whisker. No. But we can't let that happen. You know, you have to have people that speak up. I said, I can go up and I can say to everybody, oh, thank you for the victory. It's wonderful. Or I can go up and say, who the hell was the imposter that went up on the stage before and, like, claimed a victory? She did very poorly, actually. She had to win. The governor said, she's going to win, she's going to win, she's going to win. Then she failed badly. Now, I have here, if he promises to do it in a minute or less, but the only person more angry than, let's say, me, but I don't get too angry, I get even. The only person, because he was there, and he did fantastically well, by the way, and then he endorsed me. And we don't have to talk about Tim Scott, who, by the way, just got engaged, we have to tell you. And that's more important than all of this stuff. But a man that got to know her very well is Vivek. I said, Vivek, go up and say a few words about it. He has to do it in 1 minute or less, and then we're going to just say, we had one hell of a night tonight. And one other thing, before Vivek comes, do you see that poll? We're going to put it up. We have beaten Biden. You could almost say, who can't? Who the hell can't? The man can't put two sentences together. He can't find the stairs off a stage. Who can't? But Vivek, 1 minute or less. Go do it, Vivek.
What we saw tonight is America first defeating America last. That's what we saw tonight. If you want America last, you can go to Joe Biden. You got another candidate still apparently in the Republican primary. Cut your Social Security to fork over more money to Ukraine so some kleptocrat can buy a bigger house. Go to Nikki Haley. But you know who delivered a double-digit victory tonight? It is a double-digit victory as of right now, is this man, Donald J. Trump, the leader of America First. And that means something. Now, USA and Donald Trump, America First. Now, I got 30 seconds left. I want to make this point here, okay? We got to say this right. What we see right now with her continuing in this race is the ugly underbelly of American politics, where the mega donors are trying to do one thing when we, the people, say another. And it's up to us, we, the people, to at long last say, hell no. We, the people, create a government that is accountable to us. And we, the people, have said tonight, we want, again, as we did in Iowa, Donald J. Trump. And so you want to actually speak truth. That's the truth tonight. And the only thing they're rooting for is an ugly thing that we don't want to see happen. That's what these people are rooting for, is playing to say long enough so the Reid Hoffmans and the ugly Democratic George Soros Jr.'s who are funding the lawsuits against Trump can prop up their puppet. We say no to that vision. I say the general election begins tonight, and this man will win it in a landslide. God bless you, Donald J. Trump. Vote Trump, USA.
Very nice. Wasn't that nice? So this was a great evening, and I want to thank everybody in the audience, and I want to thank the people that are standing behind me. You know, I think we called it right. Immigration's a big deal, a very big deal. We have millions and millions of people flowing into our country illegally. We have no idea who the hell they are. They come from prisons, and they come from mental institutions, and it's just killing our country. And I'm talking about millions and millions and millions. They are drug dealers, they're everybody. And they come in just like walking right through. There's nobody to check, and there's nobody to vet. And we have a man with us tonight, Tom Homan, who is central casting. He's central casting. And I'd like you to say a few words about
Remarks of the victor here in New Hampshire's Republican primary, former President Trump, at his watch party in Nashua, New Hampshire. And if you listen to Vivek Ramaswamy very carefully, apparently competition is the dark underbelly of American presidential politics. To discuss that and much more, I want to bring in Washington Post national political reporters Maeve Reston and Sabrina Rodriguez. It's great to have you both. Maeve, diagram, if you can, what we heard from the former president about tonight. We thought he might talk more about Biden, but he seemed very focused on Nikki Haley.
He did. And I think that, what's so interesting there is that the argument that he's making is that the only reason that she came even somewhat close to him here was because of that participation of independents. And both he and Ramaswamy were pointing out that she did not do as well among Republicans. And that was a constant refrain that I was hearing here, like shadowing door knockers in those last few days. That argument that she was going to have to rely on Democrats who changed it to independents to vote here was something that really pierced through, I think, to a lot of GOP voters in those final days, and was something that became a real problem for her. But it's all his grievances. It's the same speech we've been hearing, and clearly they're trying to pivot to the general election, but he still wants to talk about the 2020 election, et cetera.
And Sabrina, to be clear, a couple of things. First of all, the deadline to switch, if you were going to switch, was October 6th. There was no last minute rushing to change registrations. Not only that, undeclared is a status that is respected and revered in New Hampshire. It is perfectly permissible. And secondarily, he made references to 2016 and 2020 just for everyone's benefit. He lost to Hillary Clinton here by about 3,000 votes in 2016, lost to Joe Biden in 2020 in New Hampshire in the general election by 60,000 votes. A big swing from 2016 to 2020 in this state, which Republicans know and are worried about. Your thoughts about what we've seen so far tonight?
Well, seeing the 2016 and 2020 results you mentioned here, that's been part of Nikki Haley's whole pitch in this state. And Governor Chris Sununu, on the campaign trail for her, that's something that he's brought up consistently, saying, he says we want winners, we don't want losers. That's something we've heard every day on the campaign trail. And really, that's kind of part of the message that we see from her, saying, we want to expand the electorate, especially in a state like New Hampshire with so many independent voters. We can do that in this campaign. And that's the argument they've been making, where the 2022 red wave didn't come to fruition. Republicans have seen consistent losses in places that they were so confident they'd be winning. And that's really part of the message that we're seeing from Haley.
And Sabrina, something I heard from Republicans here is, a Republican running in a federal race in New Hampshire since 2016 hasn't won. They're 0 for 11. Mm-hmm. And they attribute at least part of that to the Trump overhang here in New Hampshire. Did you hear something to that effect as well?
Absolutely. When you're talking to, consistent Republican voters in the state, you still hear that, strong Trump base that's very supportive of him and wants to see him win. But it's really those more moderate voters that have a strong presence in this state that are saying, we recognize that he's too extreme. We don't like the rhetoric. We don't want to see this going forward. We think that, a lot of them pivot to the general election the same way Trump did tonight, but in a different way. And they pivot to the general election saying, well, Haley would have a better chance of beating Biden.
Maybe I want to ask you about something, because Trump, if he knows anything, and he knows many things, but he knows a great deal about branding and owning a moment. He seemed a little angry that Nikki Haley tried to own the moment and tried to create her own brand. That's what you do in politics. If anyone knows that well, it's former President Trump.
Yeah, absolutely. She has really shown herself to be such an agile competitor in this. The way that she came out so early tonight, knowing that those results were probably going to look better for her at that moment than they do later in the night.
Yeah, exactly.
As you were pointing out, she has really known how to sort of shape her narrative here, and that's, part of what has made her a good candidate throughout the year, and it helped her rise here. I do think, though, that, to your point, that this should be a little bit of a wake-up call to Donald Trump here in New Hampshire. Like, the fact that so many voters did come out, and we saw this huge turnout to essentially make a protest vote against Donald Trump. Maybe it wasn't about that enthusiasm for Nikki Haley as much, but that should be a little bit of a wake-up call for them about the amount of work that they're going to have to do in some of these other states in the general election.
And Sabrina, yes, you can, and it's really important to do the delegate math and the base party math in a nomination fight. You have to take care of that business. But then you have to be able to think more broadly. And to Maeve's point, yes, they've done that first part, and they seem to be drilled down on that, but there's a whole other conversation that some of the results here tonight might suggest will be difficult for them come that general election contest.
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of what we've heard from Trump and this politics of grievance that, he had in 2016, he definitely built on even further in 2020, and now in this campaign, I mean, there's no speech that doesn't start and end with him making a mention of immigration or making a mention of how horrible things are in the country. And I think as you head towards a general election, you're going to have to pivot in some sense to be able to say, we want to appeal to more moderate voters, or we want to appeal to that Republican who now might be anti-Trump and is weighing, a third-party bid, because it's not just Trump versus Biden. It's a question of people deciding whether to stay home or people deciding RFK Jr. or another candidate in this race.
And Maeve, Finn and I were talking, Finn Gomez and I, before the former president came out. Would he sort of ignore Nikki Haley and just talk about Biden? Couldn't do that. She's not going away.
No. So
we're going to have a conversation.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's going to get real or anything, but we're going to have a conversation in South Carolina.
Absolutely. And you saw, her campaign manager today with that memo coming out and saying, we're in this for the long haul. The advisors to her super PAC pointing out, that independents can vote not just in Michigan, but a number of those Super Tuesday states. I think the conversation that was going on with Nikki Haley's donors leading up to this moment was, how wide a margin could she lose by here to keep on fighting, into South Carolina? And I think that, the other big question for her, because Nevada is such a non-factor this year, is how does she come out of this with a big enough burst of momentum to get those donations from Ken Griffin and the others who have been holding off? Do they really see a path for her at this point? And how do you sustain that for a month? I mean, that's very hard. And I mean, lastly, if things continue to look the way that they do in South Carolina, do you want to be humiliated in your home state as you're thinking ahead potentially to 2028? That's going to be a tough call if the poll numbers stay steady.
As Robert Costa said here a few moments ago, how much pain can you endure? That's a political question that many have to face. Nikki Haley will begin to face it if she hasn't already. Maeve Reston, Sabrina Rodriguez of the Washington Post, thank you so very much.
Thank you.
We will check back with our Anthony Salvanto at the CBS News Data Desk next. You are quite happily streaming America Decides. Welcome back to America Decides. That is the Capitol here in New Hampshire, Concord, New Hampshire, the State House building. Former President Trump, according to CBS projections, is the winner of the New Hampshire Republican primary. But former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley, UN Ambassador in the Trump administration, Nikki Haley, has vowed to stay in the race. I want to go now to our Elections and Surveys Executive Director, Anthony Salvanto, who, of course, is manning the CBS News Data Desk and all the graphics therein. Anthony, your latest and most important new impressions.
I have heard, Major, tonight a lot of talk about what margin Nikki Haley needs to get. I want to take a slightly different approach. I want to look at the different kinds of groups that she is winning and the former president is winning, because it tells a story. Take a look at this, and I think the former president mentioned this in his speech just now. Republicans voted 3-1, voted 25% for Nikki Haley. That's a story because nationally, as well as in New Hampshire, it just so happens that that's about the size of what you might label the Never Trump group. That's about the size, even nationally, of voters who say they'd like someone else and won't consider Donald Trump. But it's not enough, because there's still 3/4 in the case of New Hampshire, and there's still a sizable majority of self-identified Republicans who were voting for him for various reasons. But I want to show you one other thing, Major, and this is on the attitudinal front. People who wanted a candidate with the, as they call it, right temperament. People, and this is important, who think that Donald Trump would not be fit to serve if convicted, voted for Nikki Haley. The trouble for them, and the trouble for her perhaps, we'll watch this as it goes forward, is are there enough of those voters within the Republican base, Major?
So, never Trumpers, that's going to be something we're going to hear said about Nikki Haley and her campaign in South Carolina. The data you have there, Anthony, backs it up not only nationally and New Hampshire, That's an important insight. Thank you so very much. CBS News projects President Biden has won the Democratic primary here in New Hampshire via write-in candidacy because the Democratic National Committee has not recognized the New Hampshire primary. We will take a look at the president's re-election campaign and the challenges he might face, and some cases already is facing, within his own party. That's coming up next. You are streaming America Decides. Welcome back to America Decides at our CBS News headquarters here in Manchester, New Hampshire. We have, of course, spent much of the night talking about the Republican primary, but the Democratic contest has been called for President Biden. I'll show you the numbers as we have them right now. With about 20% of the vote counted, President Biden at 67%, Congressman Dean Phillips at about 19%. It's going in much slower because it's a write-in for President Biden. It takes a while longer to count those and post those results. I want to bring in Jake Rosen, who has been our campaign reporter based in New Hampshire. You've been to several Dean Phillips events. Your assessment of what we see playing out tonight, and is there anything for Dean Phillips to point to here at roughly 19% and say, I achieved something?
Well, Phillips told me last week when we spoke one-on-one that he needed at least 20% here, that it would be magnificent for him to do so. I think the big thing, though, is he really needed to kind of break that to kind of embarrass President Biden tonight, which is, maybe the point of his campaign and spending so much time here versus other states. He knew the attention would be on New Hampshire tonight, and he knew that if maybe he broke historical precedent for an incumbent in New Hampshire to get 30, 40, maybe even 50%, his campaign talked about a win. They told me that they felt good about tonight, that maybe there would be some kind of movement going forward for Phillips' campaign and to kind of push former President Biden to engage with his campaign, which they just have not done.
Right. And it's worth pointing out that because it's taking a while longer to do the write-in, we only have 20% in. We need to be careful about characterizing this in any way. Obviously, the president's going to win. But if there is a benchmark for Dean Phillips, over 20%, maybe he finds some oxygen from the results to carry on.
Sure. He spent $5 million on this race already of his own money. I think it's important to see how many donors he gets coming out of this and how much more of his own money he's willing to put into this race. But I think the big thing, you're right, going forward is that historical precedent. The Biden write-in campaign has told me that they compared this to the Lisa Murkowski write-in years ago, but that they really felt comfortable in this win, this grassroots effort from former state Democratic officials and other people in the state who had supported President Biden. And they just felt basically that they had the momentum. Voters who I talked to today, I did not find a Dean Phillips voter.
Very good. Jake Rosen, thank you so very much. We will check back with our Anthony Salvanto at the CBS News Data Desk for more about turnout and what was on voters' minds in this New Hampshire primary. You are streaming, and happily so, America Decides. Welcome back to America Decides at our CBS News headquarters right here in downtown Manchester, New Hampshire. I want to go now to our Elections and Surveys Executive Director, Anthony Salvanto, who, of course, is at the CBS News Data Desk. Anthony, I know you have a story to tell about turnout tonight. What is it?
And we love turnout estimates here at the Data Desk because they do tell that story, and as we all do. And so, look, we're estimating right now turnout to be around 320,000. Now, in context, that is or would be a record. It would exceed the around 286 that was back in 2016. And the reason that's important is that we've been talking all night about these two groups, about the independents, about the more moderate voters who, yes, flooded into this primary and in large part backed Nikki Haley, but then the large numbers of Republicans who also turned out in force, and that bolstered and underpinned Donald Trump. And that's the underpinning of that turnout story. And that, when you see attitude measures like this, where Donald Trump won, voters who say didn't think Joe Biden won in 2020, wants a candidate who fights for them. Let's not forget how Republicans came out in force too. And that's the turnout story, Major.
Anthony Salvanto, thank you very much. As I heard from Republican after Republican here in New Hampshire, whether they were supporting Nikki Haley or Donald Trump, because they always think about that competition with Iowa, they said this over and over again. 1/3 the population, 3 times the turnout. That's exactly what came to bear tonight here in New Hampshire. That does it for our special New Hampshire primary edition of America Decides from Manchester. John Dickerson takes over our continuing coverage of the New Hampshire primary. After this break, you are streaming CBS News.